and to the Credentials Committee. My name is Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, and I live at 626 East Lafayette Street, Roosevelt, Mississippi, Sunflower County, the home of Senator James O. Eastland and Senator Stennis. It was the 31st of August in 1962 that 18 of us traveled 26 miles to the county courthouse in Indianola to try to register to become first-class citizens. We was met in Indianola by policemen, highway patrolmen, and they only allowed 2 of us in to take the literacy test at the time. After we had taken this test and started back to Roosevelt, we was held up by the city police and the state highway patrolmen and carried back to Indianola, where the bus driver was charged that day with driving a bus the wrong color. After we paid the fine among us, we continued on to Roosevelt, and Reverend Jeff Sonny carried me 4 miles in the rural area where I had worked as a timekeeper and sharecropper for 18 years. I was met there by my children that told me the plantation owner was angry because I had gone down, tried to register. After they told me, my husband came and said the plantation owner was raising Cain because I had tried to register. And before he quit talking, the plantation owner came and said, Fannie Lou, do you know, did Pap tell you what I said? And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I mean that if you don't go down and withdraw your registration, you will have to leave. That then if you go down and withdraw, that you still might have to go because we are not ready for that in Mississippi. And I addressed him and told him that I didn't try to register for you. I tried to register for myself. I had to leave that same night. All of this is on account of we want to register to become first-class citizens. And if the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off of the hook because our lives be threatened daily because we want to live as decent human beings in America? Thank you.
Equity. It is about equity. This evening, we are taking a look at President Clinton's Executive Order on Environmental Justice 12898 that was signed on February the 11th, 1994, 28 years ago. We have an esteemed, distinguished panel for you tonight to take us back a little bit and to help us go forward. We will be joined this evening by the environmental justice guru, Vernice Miller-Travis, who was one of those who witnessed the signing of the executive order. We will also have on our panel Reverend Michael Malcolm, the great warrior of Alabama, Dr. Fatima Shafi, the political science guru at Spelman. We are waiting for our government people, Brian Holtzclaw from the Region 4 Environmental Protection Agency, and Cynthia Peurifoy, formerly with the EPA, who's now a community consultant. We have Kim Gaddy from New Jersey with the Moving Forward Network, along with Angelo Logan out of California. And of course, we stay in the South with Reverend Gwendolyn Jenkins, who is the baddest preacher on the planet, as well as the executive director and founder of the Imani Group. None of these people need any introductions. But we are here because of environmental justice. And what is environmental justice? So I have a set of questions for our panelists tonight. I'm asking them to look at, and I'm going to ask you to look at them as well. Feel free to send in any comments. I am Dr. Mildred McClain. I am with the Partnership for Southern Equity as the organizer for the Georgia Coast Communities. Again, welcome to Greenversations, where we look at the issues and how they intersect with one another. The struggle continues. You know, we set laws and statutes and regulations in place. And like Fannie Lou Hamer said, how do we protect ourselves from the ugly American? How do we protect regulations that are put in place to protect the environment, to protect our health? So sit back and get ready to be taught, to be blessed, and to have a rip-roaring good time celebrating the 28th anniversary of the Executive Order on Environmental Justice. Where have we come from? What was its significance? Where are we going with it? How can we get Biden to lift it up? It's just been sitting there. How do we use it? And so without further ado, we're going to ask Fannie Lou Hamer once again to come before us and set the stage, and we'll move right straight to the explanation of what the executive order is, what it tried to do, and where it is at now. So, Sister Alicia, would you please let Fannie Lou Hamer bless us once again? Sister Alicia? While we are waiting for Fannie, we're having a few little technical difficulties. The executive order was very significant for the environmental justice movement, and it still has a relevance for today. I'm going to ask Sister Bernice Miller Travis to kick us off and talk a little bit about the background of the order and what was its significance. How did it come to be? Sister Bernice.
Thank you, Dr. McClain. Well, a lot of mobilization had gone on in lots of communities, including in Savannah, including across the South, including on tribal reservations, including in New York City, where I was from, in Harlem, in California, everywhere that people of color were, we were demanding, we were marching, we were organizing, that our lives and our well-being was being overlooked by our government agencies, most especially the Environmental Protection Agency, when it came to environmental threats and harms, threats to our health, threats to our very lives, that they were not providing equal protection. So we were organizing. We had come together in October of 1991 at the First National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit. We had come from all over the United States and indeed from all over the world to meet and raise our voices to really lift up the notion of environmental racism and environmental justice. We put forth the 17 principles of environmental justice. And then we went back home to our communities to organize and to work and to build this social movement from the ground up. But one of the things that we came out of that conference with was a call to the federal government to step forward and step up and meet their obligations to provide equal protection under the law for all people, especially those of us who were living right on the fence line of environmental threats of every possible imagination. And we continue to work with the federal government. We first started that conversation with the Bush administration, George H.W. Bush, the first President Bush. And then we rolled that conversation into the Clinton administration. And then with President Clinton and his staff and staff leaders, Vice President Gore's office, the White House Council on Environmental Quality, the Domestic Policy Council at the White House. We worked together over several months to draft some guiding principles, and then those principles came forward as Executive Order 12898 on environmental justice, signed by President Clinton on February 11th, 1994. I spent months, as did many others, advising the administration on what they needed to do and how they needed to articulate what they were going to do to really make sure they were providing the full benefit of all the power of the federal government to protect us and protect our lives and protect our communities. And so we were at another conference. So let me give a little backdrop. Here in the DMV, as we call it, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, it does snow here from time to time, but not like up in New York, where I'm from, or in New England, or in the Midwest, or in the Pacific Northwest. But it does snow. That particular week of February 11th, 1994, there were 3 blizzards in DC. And when I tell you the city had come to a screeching halt, the subways were not running. Cars were told to stay off the roads. Planes were not flying into the airports. Everything was shut down. And we, Dr. McClain, myself, and several others, were at another conference hosted by EPA and the National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences on reframing the federal research agenda to begin to include race and environmental threats. And President Clinton decided, since there were 1,700 of us at that conference in Northern Virginia, to pull together an event in the Oval Office where he would sign the executive order on environmental justice. Dr. McClain and I were privileged to be there to watch President Clinton do that. And then, as they say, Mildred, the rest is history. Doc, I can keep talking, audience. Well, let's not have any dead air time until Dr. McClain rejoins us. But there's a straight line from the work that Fannie Lou Hamer was doing and the work that we have been doing in the environmental justice movement for going on almost 40 years. We took her call very seriously about lifting up our people, defending our people with our very lives, making sure that we used every tool available to us. We have built a social movement on the backs of the civil rights movement to provide equal protection before the law to everyone. And that is what the executive order laid the foundation to do that. We are still working to bring the executive order into full bloom. We are now talking about beefing up the executive order in this new administration. But it has been an amazing journey, and a journey that has been lifted up every moment, every step, every measure of progress, every value, every thought, every strategy has been done by people on the ground in communities facing environmental harms and fighting for their very lives and their well-being. It has been an extraordinary journey, and we have not taken a step off the battlefield, which is the message that we got from our sister Fannie Lou Hamer: fight until you can't fight anymore. And that's what we have been doing. Dr. McClain? Alicia? Here comes Dr. McClain. I could keep talking. Well, while we're waiting for Dr. McClain, I am not supposed to be doing this much talking, but let me say this one thing. I was privileged as a young person to work for an organization called the Center for Constitutional Rights, a civil rights organization that grew out of the legal team that were the lawyers that represented the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And we had an office in Greenville, Mississippi, led by the amazing Margaret Carey, who is now a judge, a district court judge in Greenville and Greenwood, Mississippi. And I was privileged and honored to be able to work with Margaret to continue the fight for voting rights in the state of Mississippi and across the Mississippi Delta. And today, Mississippi has more Black elected officials than any other state in the nation because, again, of the work of Fannie Lou Hamer and folks on the ground. Reverend Malcolm?
Well, Dr. Big Sister Get 'em told, I wanted to make sure that I filled in for Dr. McClain, and I come on and you and I have some conversation because I kind of know your history just a little bit, and you are already telling the history, but I wanted people to know just how phenomenal of a person you are and how steeped in the history of environmental justice you are. And knowing your history, in particular with the UCC, and your work with the very first report on environmental justice, can you tell some people about this report and how it actually influenced the executive order that we're talking about this evening?
Thank you, Dr. Malcolm, Reverend Malcolm. So Reverend Malcolm and I belong to the same denomination, the United Church of Christ. The United Church of Christ is a very small Protestant denomination. I mean, I don't know, do we have 4 million members? But we are a mighty and powerful faith. And we did a research project back in 1985 to 1987, a special project on toxic injustice, which resulted in the publication of a report, Toxic Waste and Race in the United States, which really broke open the conversation about environmental racism and environmental justice. And one of the recommendations in our report was that we needed the federal government to issue an executive order signed by the president to put a marker down that the federal government was going to join this fight. Dr. McClain, back to you.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, hallelujah. Well, you know, we be so good on this that the hackers be hacking, but you're not going to hack the truth tonight. And so if I go again, y'all just keep on talking. Bernice, Reverend Malcolm, y'all are in charge. But part of the executive order as well instructed federal agencies to go back to their respective places and do an assessment of staff, program, initiatives, all of those things to see where they were falling short, where inequities existed. And so I wanted Cynthia to come on and talk a little bit about the thinking of EPA at that time and how they responded to trying to implement the executive order. And to talk a little bit about what's the difference between an executive order and a regulation and a rule and a statute, and you know, how do we deal with all these things to try to achieve environmental justice? And how do we work with agencies like EPA and people like Cynthia Peurifoy, who became a master communicator with the community? She became our mother, our father, our family, and she guided us through how to work effectively with the government around justice issues. And she left EPA and went right totally smack dab into the community. Sister Cynthia, talk to us about personally, how did you feel when the executive order was issued, and how did you go about planning out how you personally was going to implement it as an employee of EPA Region 4? Take yourself off of mute.
Hello, Dr. McClain, and hello, everybody. And it is so wonderful to see you, young lady. And let me correct you right here. You guys guided me. I didn't guide you, you guided me, but we'll talk about that later. But I think, you know, when the executive order was issued, we were all so excited because we had been working in the environmental justice arena for a while. We really understood the concerns the community had. We knew there were things that we needed to do and do more. So to me, the executive order was, this is what you can do. This is how you can do it. Here you got some teeth now to be able to do what you need to do. So that was really good. And I think internally, we started doing a lot of things. We started working more with other federal agencies. The interagency working group really did some wonderful things, putting together pilot projects and going out to communities and starting to really understand from each agency perspective what needed to be done. And it's really scary because I see a lot of that same thing happening now. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what they don't still know, but that's a whole nother story. So I think it was a great thing because we internally started putting plans together. We started having discussions. We started looking, you talked about rules and regulations and all of those things, the laws that govern our work. And we really had to do a lot of work to really look at what laws we had and what was in place and what could be done and what couldn't be done. And we heard that a lot in terms of what exactly couldn't be done. But I think the executive order kind of opened up a lot of doors and made people start thinking a little bit differently about how to go about addressing environmental justice concerns. I also think that out of the executive order, a lot of great work took place in communities. And it really elevated a lot of the communities who were working. I mean, Dr. McClain, the work that you've done all these years has been phenomenal. I love the work that you've done there in Savannah, and just I was thinking about some people who are no longer here that really pushed you to see what we could be done for their community in the midst of all the industry there, and we ran across that so much. So we had a lot of that, and I want to mention also, I'm thinking about someone else who, when we talk about the executive order, I think she was standing there when it was signed, and of course the phone would ring.
Connie Tucker.
Thinking about Connie Tucker
Mm-hmm.
and the work that she did. So I think, have I said enough, or do I need to say more?
We'll come back to you. We'll come right back to you.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Dr. Shafi, you are representing academia, and you have been working both with government as well as community in this environmental justice fight. You have used the executive order in teaching your students and working with different initiatives. Talk to us a little bit about what was the response of Spelman and other academic institutions, particularly HBCUs, to this Executive Order 12898. And for those of you who are, great researchers, go on Wikipedia, Google what the executive order is. There are many, many pieces to it. We're just hitting some broad strokes tonight, but we're doing this because the anniversary is Friday. And people have forgotten that there is an executive order on environmental justice. Dr. Shafi, talk to us a little bit.
Well, first of all, hello, everyone. And thank you, Dr. McClain, for including me in this important conversation. And if you recall, at the time, environmental justice was not on radar of a lot of institutions. It was, and I think, especially in academia, if you talked about environmental justice, you were dismissed as not being a scholar, but activist. So I think we came a long way. We really did come a long way. When executive order was issued at the time, I was a part of a faculty at Clark Atlanta University, because I don't know if you knew, but I was at Clark Atlanta from 94 to 97 before coming back again to Spelman. And there were lots of commotion there. I think we were excited. And then I remember Dr. Bullard joined the faculty later in 94, and there was a consortium of advancing green into curriculum, and that was really before ASHE or anything else. there were 17 historically Black colleges and minority institutions that were thinking about incorporating sustainability into curriculum. And now, none of these Ivy League schools were talking about sustainability into curriculum. So HBCUs were ahead of the game. And I think I personally, if you ask me what I think about 12898, I was very excited. I thought it was a landmark because it was the first federal action to address EJ concerns. I thought it was historic because it incorporated the concept of EJ into the language of federal government. And it was visionary and inspirational, but as you know, it was short on substance because it lacked any legal mandate for EJ concerns to be factored in any permitting, citing of Lulu's or EJ stakeholders' input to be considered during the decision making. I think it was, in a way, for the federal government to acknowledge the legitimacy of the environmental justice movement and its underlying tenet that people of color and low-income populations are burdened with the disproportionate share of health-threatening pollution. And I think that was really the key, that here the federal government is saying, yes, EJ, environmental justice is happening, and acknowledging it. I think that was. And, you know, the order scope was very limited. It called to action was confined into 17 federal agencies, and these federal agencies, honestly, many of them have yet to fully really comply with the order. Even the EPA, that was really the key agency, you know how many Inspector General's reports are out there saying that the agency failed to comply with the order of the EJ order. So, executive order. So, and still fast forward 5 presidents, we are still are talking about the initial order and the agency's call to action. So I can add more, but let me stop because I want other people to have a chance.
Thanks, Doc. You added some more sauce to the pot. We got this jambalaya growing. Brother Angelo, from California, what were you doing in 1994 when the executive order was signed? And how did you respond? How did your community respond? And were you able to use it in any kind of way that was valuable?
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to, be on this panel with such amazing leaders and just amazing people all together. And I got to say, we stand on the shoulders of great folks, and some of these folks on the call today, whether you're scholars or whether you're community leaders or are folks, in government that are helping us to move the agenda for environmental justice forward. It's a privilege. And so thank you. I'll just say that for me, the biggest outcome of the executive order for environmental justice really is that it was a springboard, that it was a catalyst for really moving a movement, motivating a movement of folks forward and to organize. I was not involved in environmental justice in the sense that you might think of it today. I didn't even really know the term environmental justice until like 1999, right? But I knew what environmental racism was or is because I lived it, I experienced it. Folks in my community are to this day continuously dying and suffering from respiratory illnesses from the built environment that I grew up in. You know, people being evacuated because of chemical spills and releases, you know, lead and arsenic being dumped in our communities, and the list goes on. We all know, you know, this story of cumulative impacts in our communities. So I knew what that was. I didn't know the terminology for that. But when I learned of this movement, of the work, it was really out of necessity for fighting for my community that I grew up in, as folks were just dying from cancer. And as I started to kind of really think about how to organize our community around these issues, I started to learn that there's actual movement happening, that there's folks galvanizing around this issue globally and across the United States. So I started to learn that there are all these, you know, programs and policies that have been in place or that intend to resolve the issue that really started as a result of the executive order and the work that you all did. I would say the biggest benefit out of the executive order was the fact that you all came together, that you all organized together, that you started a movement together, that you used the executive order, or at least the action from the administration, as a vehicle to organize your communities and communities across the country and the globe around this really critical issue. And so we see that today as Biden has committed to environmental justice, using his commitment to a updated executive order as a vehicle for organizing our communities, right? As a vehicle for building power in our communities and building power across the movement so that we can really achieve real environmental justice. Really, at the end of the day, you know, I haven't seen environmental justice. I don't think any of us have seen environmental justice, and we probably will never, but we have seen environmental racism. The intent is that we work towards environmental justice to make sure our communities are whole, that they're thriving, not just surviving. And we'll use these particular opportunities, whether they're executive orders or other policies, as vehicles to organize our communities, connect our communities from place to place, to build power, to build a strong movement, a global movement, to achieve what we need to for our communities. And again, I can't tell you what a pleasure, what a privilege, what an honor it is to work with so many great leaders. As I have come up into this movement over the years, you know, it's been, and I'm sure you all, this probably resonates with all of you, but it's been 22 years since I've been working in environmental justice movement. And it seems like it's just like a blip, you know, it's like it went by quickly. And so, but, you know, I'm relatively a newcomer, you know, when it comes to the environmental justice movement. And to that end, I wanted to just like also encourage us. We have work to do, right? You all seen the opportunity when there was a commitment to sign an executive order. And instead of retreating, you advanced and you worked hard to push the administration to do what was right. And we see that as an opportunity today, as the administration has made commitments to hold them accountable, to make sure that they take real actions, that there is real meat on the bones, that there are actionable items within this updated environmental justice executive order out of this new administration, and that we don't retreat, but that we advance. And we do that by taking care of each other, that we do collective care so that we are making sure that we are not burning out, but we are making the movement a movement that is looking out for each other, caring for each other, but also getting work done, right? Taking action. And the other work that I wanted to say, as you know, we think about the executive order anniversary, is that we have a lot of work to do in terms of working with folks to bring them up into leadership, right? Like it isn't about one person, it isn't about 10 people, it isn't about even, you know, a couple of dozen of leaders in the environmental justice movement. We need to mobilize everyone in our communities, and we need to bring up new leaders. We need to bring up folks so they're positioned so that when we need to step into a different role or a different position, that we can choose from a whole variety of folks, not just one or two. And so really, I wanted to encourage us to think about how we make space for new and or different leaders to like step into those spaces. So using this moment, the anniversary, as well as the potential or the commitment of the Biden administration to sign a new executive order as an organizing opportunity to bring in new folks so that we can use that as a sign of hope and work towards achieving our common goals.
Ashe, you said a mouthful, brother. And I'm going to let your comrade, Sister Kim Gaddy out of New Jersey, follow behind you. We have been joined by Brian Holtzclaw, who is still with EPA Region 4, and we're going to ask him to talk about some ways we can use that executive order today. Sister Kim Gaddy, come on and talk to us, sister.
Well, thank you, and good evening, everyone, and thank you. I'm from Newark, New Jersey, and so my backyard is the second largest port. And so what I like to do with the Southwater Environmental Alliance, and I've been with Clean Water Action as the National Environmental Justice Director now in this movement and in this space for 21 years. So I'm 1 year behind Angelo. So in 1994, I was in municipal government working in City Hall as a chief of staff for the council president and talking about lead issues, lead paint in homes, dust, and, connecting all of these environmental issues with the poor health of our children. I was elected school board member, and we was talking about lead in the drinking water back then. Fast forward 20 years, plus we were still talking about lead in the drinking water in our schools and in our homes. And so what was so important about this executive order to me, it helped us organize in our community. And I won't forget, in 2002, I was able to attend the Second People of Color conference. And I was so fired up when I came back from there because I had just started working for Clean Water Action in 2001. And to go to that conference, see Bernice, see yourself, see so many other leaders who was talking about this work that we needed to do. And like Angelo, we would always call it environmental racism. Why do we in certain zip codes have to deal with this pollution, and in other more affluent neighborhoods, they didn't live like this? And so we came back fired up, and we began to fight for cumulative impacts laws and ordinances in various local cities throughout the state of New Jersey. And we were fortunate in August of 2020, after fighting for 12 years, to get our governor to sign a law, the first environmental justice cumulative impacts law in the nation, in our state. And it is because of the work that you all had did and what was happening at the federal level. We saw that as a way to push on a local level because we knew we had to act globally. We have to think globally, but act locally. And so we was able to push and fight to get our DEP in our state to say, hey, we need to deny or condition certain permits due to cumulative impacts of pollution. We just can't have all this pollution in our communities and have, us gasping for air and living in diesel death zones where we're the backyard to 25,000 trucks that come in and out of our port. 4,500 stay on our local roads. We have the largest incinerator in the Northeast. We have so many toxic plants in our neighborhoods, Superfund sites in our neighborhoods. And so the cumulative impacts of pollution was just killing us. And we began to just push back and say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go around to local cities and get them to adopt cumulative impacts ordinances until the state can adopt one. And so now that we have this law at the state level, we're fighting to get regulations because we know that we can't take too much more of this pollution in our communities. And so we were inspired by the work of so many leaders before us, and we have begun to create the next generation of environmental justice advocates. Southwater Environmental Alliance, thinking about the Spelman College, I hired recent graduate who was our environmental justice organizer, 21, majored in environmental sciences, and came back home, and I snatched her up, because we have to make sure that this work continues beyond us. And so when I think about all the work of the past, and I'm looking for a brighter future, we're looking for a future where people don't look at Newark as a dumping zone. Like, they don't think they could come into these frontline and fence line communities and just put up warehouses, just put up Amazons, huge hubs and things of those natures where they are allowing more pollution to come in and kill us. And so that's why it's so important for us to make sure we are lifting up all the voices of our community, but we're also holding our DEP accountable. We're holding our elected officials accountable. We're training individuals to go to the zoning and planning board meetings, because that is where the power is vested also. They make some key decisions at those levels as to what can happen in your neighborhood or your community. And so now we have to educate folks to attend these meetings, to push back on the proliferation of warehouses, that every time we turn around, another warehouse is being pushed in our neighborhood with more trucks, more pollution. We also are fighting, we shouldn't be fighting energy centers that want to come into to our city and also pollute. And so it is just devastating that even in 2022, we're talking about things that people fought for 20 years ago. And it seems like we are right there again today. And so we have to begin to change that. And so that's what we're doing in the city of Newark. We're fighting, we're allowing people to join our table. We are creating spaces for different relationships where folks could come in with an economics background, because we're not saying no to development, but we want development that is not going to poison us or harm our community. We want vibrant neighborhoods. We don't want us to keep being pushed out of our neighborhoods, and then we lose the culture and the history that we fought for so hard. As a fourth generation Norker, I know so many places that was just history for us. And you turn around and you look, they're all gone, right? And the people are being displaced. And so we're fighting to say, no, we want to change Newark. We want to make it healthy. We want to make it vibrant. But we also want to make sure the people who was here will still be here. And so that's our fight. And I think that is important to continue that legacy as we move forward. So I see.
The executive order, at the federal level, I'm so glad that Sister Kim talked about the power of the state and the power at the local level, because often we are looking at federal policies and national policies, but when it really gets down to where the rubber meets the road is at the state level and at the city and county level. Brian, come and talk to us a little bit as we move to that 7 o'clock hour. Reverend Malcolm and Reverend Jenkins get ready. Brian, talk to us a little bit about today's EPA Region 4 and this whole notion about the executive order on environmental justice, because remember in 1994, it gave a directive to the federal agencies, as Dr. Shafi said earlier, to go back and do some work and then change some things. But they were to work in concert with the community. Talk to us a little bit about what happened in Region 4.
Well, just like Angelo a little bit, I feel very honored and privileged. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
To be here today. I've been doing community-based environmental justice work for about 29 years. It all started when I raised my hand. I was kind of tired of working in the office in Atlanta, and I wanted to get out into the field. And when I volunteered to work in the state of Kentucky, my eyes were really open to the injustices of the Appalachian people there, living right next to refineries, chemical companies, you name it. And through many different rotations of different kinds of work, I've always held closely in my heart EJ. But that executive order came about in my year one of being out in the field. I really didn't feel it until I got back in the office. I went to my very first NEJAC meeting in '95, but I'm so happy that you are focusing on this order because I think we're somewhat distracted by all these other initiatives, Justice 40, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and all these efforts coming down from headquarters. I think the bread and butter is really in this order, and I'm glad you're celebrating the anniversary. We have got so much to do. As far as Region 4 goes, we do have a new administrator, just like all the other regional offices. I would encourage continue to hold the EPA accountable, like it was stated. Also, the states. It's your right to hold our feet to the fire. Don't let us forget you're out there. I would really encourage you inviting upper management out into the field, because it wasn't until I got out of the office and lived for 2 years walking on porches, looking at Rio fence line communities, that I got it. And the more invitations you can do for listening sessions, roundtables with senior management at EPA and even the states, I think it's going to be more promising for you all. Because without that interaction with the communities who are really feeling the pain and of injustices, I don't think EPA is going to truly actualize what they can truly be on this front. We have got to do a better job, and I think headquarters recognize not only identifying EJ communities, but addressing disproportionate environmental and health impacts. We're making some progress that in headquarters. Charles Lee and a work group is working closely on a cumulative impacts guidance. We're crossing our fingers. It's going to be released earlier than later. The Office of Inspector General came out with an article. They are about to do all kinds of audits on EJ on behalf of EPA, and looking over our shoulder. How much have we done really to advance the needle on EJ for communities this coming year? So that kind of pressure, that kind of attention is always noteworthy on state and federal government. Keep us doing what we need to do, and don't give up. There's quite a contingent in Region 4 of committed people. We've just formed a management team, EJ Advisory Council, that my group I'm supervising right now. I'm only up to 4 employees doing EJ for the whole Southeast. I'm hoping to hire more people to be more, make more of a difference, but we've got to be leveraging much better the 700 employees in and around us to integrate environmental justice in every day of their job. And we're doing our best for that right now. So without taking up any more time, I'd like to pass it back. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Brian, and you brought it right home for me. Reverend Malcolm, take us to church.
Dr. McClain, as I reflect on the history of the 28 years of this executive order and the fact that we are still fighting to have environmental justice, I can't help but to say that this executive order has been a clarion call to communities to continue this fight. Even to this day, we need executive orders as well as Build Back Better, as well as other investments. But we also need to ensure that these are investments in our communities, investments that build wealth, investments that help to endure our legacy and help us to thrive in society. investments that provide equity to us. And we need executive action to make this happen still to this day. We need to enforce the executive order that we have. We still have yet to have environmental justice. And if we really look at the history and look at where we are today, we can even say that we've taken some seats back. We are grateful to those who have fought for us in our times past, and we continue to look to their guidance and their mentorship. But us who are of younger age and of more energy, it's now our time to pick up that mantle and continue the fight. Continue this fight for environmental justice. Continue this fight for equity. Continue this fight so that we as a people can thrive together collectively. I've said it once before, and I'll say it again, and I'll continue to say it. My individual success is not enough. Unless we collectively achieve, we've not achieved anything. We're not free until all of us are free. Thank you for my time.
Thank you so much. Obviously, we're going to have a part 2 because we have not even gotten to but one of my questions, and I have 5. So I'm going to check your schedules to make sure that we can do part 2 because this is so important. 28 years of an executive order, and we're still almost in certain communities at ground zero. And so what do we do? What do we say to Biden on Friday? I'm going to ask everybody to send some kind of note to Biden and his White House Environmental Justice Council, the National Environmental Justice Council, to raise this issue about how we can revive, strengthen, and utilize Executive Order 12898 in 2022 and beyond. As we get ready to close out, we have a powerful woman from the South, the Deep South, Reverend Gwendolyn Jenkins. You have listened to everything that has been said. You yourself have been involved in the environmental justice movement for quite some time. You have the Sharp sisters and the courageous brothers, I forget what their name is, but you got the young'uns that you bring to the Black Youth Leadership Development Institute, which we hope to resume as soon as COVID will allow us. So you're working with the spectrum, you're working with the faith community, you're working with the community itself. And I'll just tell everybody the first time we met and had our first community meeting in Aiken, South Carolina, around the Savannah River site and the tritium that had been leaked into the Savannah River and all the stuff that was going on. We had our first meeting in her funeral parlor. There was some dead bodies on one end, we was cooking on the other end, and then we was meeting in the middle. And so we, environmental justice warriors, just worry up wherever we have to go. And we do the darn thing. Reverend Jenkins, sum up what you've heard and take us forward.
First of all, Bahati, my honor, my honor, my honor, my honor, my honor, my sister, my friend. Just to listen to each one of the speakers and to the guests and their family is what this is. A reunion here tonight of new cousins and new family we've not met, but truly to listen to Bernice Miller Travis, to recant the history, but not just to recite the history, but she is the history. You are the history when this happened. To listen to Cynthia Peurifoy, who's not a bureaucrat, not just one of the government folks, but truly someone inside the agency, an angel with skin on their shoulders, Dr. Shafi, who puts the practice and then the theory of the science all together. And then, Doc, as I listen to them, I cannot but rest for just a quick second on your genius vision, Akanet, which we come right back to tonight. It's room for it all. It's room for the veterans. It's room for the toddlers. It's room for the novice. And it's no accident that you started with Fannie Lou. And I said with you in Savannah the other week, Fannie Lou says she's sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I come by to confess that I is tired too. I'm tired too. Angelo, to talk about environmental racism and the industrial issues. And as we watch that industrial fire in Winston-Salem, I can help but wonder not if, but when it will happen in East Augusta, that community where I pastor at Hudson Memorial CME Church that sits in the bowl of those 5 industrial plants that on any given day would make that look like a joke. Sister Kim Gaddy, to talk about the different kinds of relationships that we've got, the wealth, the intellect that we've got to come now to the fight, that we've got to bring to the table. Yeah, the activism, yes, the motivation, but we've also got to fine tune it and come to the table and use all of our tools when we talk about development. Well, what's a community benefit agreement? And how does that happen, whether it's in Newark or Aiken or Birmingham or Savannah? What is the benefit? Because if it benefits one, it benefits all. And being able to do that. And then, Brian, to hear you still in the agency, boot on the ground in the agency, but I can also remember those days of laughing with Cynthia Peurifoy, of calling Region 4, and it's like it's different fractions of the house right there, of how to navigate. And then there comes this young warrior king by the name of Michael Malcolm, who comes, yes, with a degree of youth, but then with this deep-seated wisdom and knowledge rooted in his DNA that makes him trustworthy immediately when he sits at the table. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take as we celebrate and we remember that act of that bring us to environmental justice. You know, it's more than activists. That act gave it more than just validation to us activists. And it was more than just about feelings. It gave teeth to our movement. It validated. Oh, but it also reminds us that EJ is sexy again. It's a sexy issue again. And whether it's Justice 40, whether it's the infrastructure bill, Build Back Better, the big greens, the networks, they are all doing it on the backs of our community. They're all benefiting from the backs of the communities, those disenfranchised and marginalized communities. And so we don't want no more crumbs that fall from the master table. We want to build the table. We don't need to share pies. Everybody can have a pie. We've got enough largesse, even within this tonight. And so I'm going to pause right there. I'm excited. I'm fired up right now like I've not been in a long time. And so, Doc, this has to be part 1, because if you've just gotten through one question, I just shudder to see what we're going to do when we get to question 5. All of the answers will be given and everything will be all right. I've got a feeling that everything is going to be all right. Be all right. Be all right. Thank you.
Be all right. I got a feeling everything gonna be all right. So I'll just remind you, ain't gonna let nobody turn us around, turn us around, turn us around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. We gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching to freedom's land, straight to justice, straight to justice. I want to thank you all so much. And I'm going to commit you to part 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we'll take each question. And by the time we finish, we'll have a proclamation being sent to Biden. But if you can on Friday, all of those who are here with me, send something to your senator, send something to your rep, send something to your governor, send something to your county commissioner, your city council person, your mayor, to lift up Executive Order 12898 that focuses on environmental.
Go ahead, Hudson. See the screen.
Say that again. Okie dokie. So everybody ready for part 2 through 5? Please get your pens, your pencils, and make that phone call, send that email. And I challenge you that by the time we talk again, you will bring to this table at least one young person that's sitting behind you. Each of you to bring one young person to sit behind you at your feet to understand their role and responsibility as we go forward. We have not won yet, but we're on the way. So I'm going to ask Fannie Lou Hamer to take us home as we look at these beautiful faces and remember the legacy that Fannie Lou Hamer has passed on to us. Sister Alicia or brother, bring us home with Fannie Lou Hamer. And thank you all so very much. You were so good. I bring apologies for Pat Carey Brown, who was to join us this evening, but could not, but certainly, oh, Cynthia, you cheated. She done brought the young person on already. Bless your heart. See, she gonna get a jump on us. So you see what we got to have is a young person right there with us. Yes. Do we have that video to end up with? Maybe we're having technical difficulties again. Brother Andre? Well, then I'm gonna keep on talking, keep on walking, walking up to freedom's land. We'll see you next time with Greenversations with the Partnership for Southern Equity. Good night.
Good night. Good night, Dr. McClain.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Beautiful, beautiful.